Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Tal Meirson Lessa. I teach a course at Temple University called Teaching English Language Learners in the Early Grades. It's in the Department of Teaching and Learning in the College of Education.
I'm Erica Johnston. I graduated with my master's in the TESOL program at Temple University a few years ago, and I'm back teaching as an adjunct with some administrative responsibilities as well in the TESOL department. And I teach the same course that Dr. Lessa teaches, but for grades 4 through 12. She teaches for the early grades. And then I also teach a second course for, it's called Discourse Practices in Diverse Communities. It's essentially sort of an introductory linguistics course for students who are interested in teaching in non-traditional contexts, like teaching abroad, teaching adults, community-based environments, etc. We do have one more co-presenter who is on her way. She'll be here momentarily. That's Associate Dean Sniad from Temple University.
All right, so welcome. We'd like to start with a question for all of you. So you can take a minute to think about it and then maybe do a quick turn and talk with someone around you. What challenges do you encounter teaching face-to-face classes? So just take a minute to think about the challenges. And whenever you're ready, you can just turn and talk to the person next to you or behind you and share some of those challenges. Perfect. Do you think I could listen? Thank you, everyone. So if we could just hear some of the ideas, the challenges that you talked about. So as the Spirit moves you, just let us know what challenges you face teaching face-to-face classes.
We were talking about participation and ways of working with our students individually or in smaller groups, or having them more accountable in terms of participation rather than having a conversation dominated perhaps by the same students.
Thank you.
for divergences in the discussion, so that you can indulge it, but not so much that in that last 5 minutes you're trying to squeeze in 15 minutes worth of discussion that you were hoping to get to.
Shutting up myself.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Shutting myself up.
Uh-huh.
I think just the level of students we have, we move from those who are very unprepared to those who are, on point and can self-regulate and, all of those kinds of higher order kinds of behavior to those who, are just not, mature enough, psychologically mature enough, let alone prepared academically.
I'm thinking about the scheduling of classes for non-traditional students. We have a first-year writing course that meets for 4 hours every Monday night until 9:30 p.m. I love working with that class.
So a follow-up question then is, how have you tried to address these challenges that you faced? So take a minute to think about how you've addressed them. And then go ahead and start to talk.
The slides coming up. I don't know which version.
The one I sent this morning is what we're currently using. Yeah.
I don't have a.
A long time since elementary school. We don't know where to signal.
All right, so we'll bring it back over. Thank you. So if a few people just want to share how you've addressed some of the challenges you talked about in your class. Yes.
Well, so I organize groups and I do this kind of flipping business where I deliver content, assess their content, and then I can organize the groups before they come to class.
That's great. Ask her that. Okay. Okay, so we have the parable of the trapeze next. Dr. Sniad.
Hi.
Jump on in, just like a trapeze.
So, well, first of all, geez. They should put X's on the floor so we know where to stand. So my name is Tamara Sniad. I, as of the early March, I became the Associate Dean of Teacher Education at Temple University. Before that, I was brought onto Temple because Pennsylvania started the requirement that all teacher education majors had to take a course on working with English language learners. And so that course was brought in 2011, started requirement, and so they brought me on as a faculty member, and I got to do all the field placements for all the students who were doing that. The first semester we had 7 sections, all full. So there was a lot of work that we had to hit the ground running. So over the past 8 years, I've had such pleasure to work with such fantastic adjuncts and other instructors to try to think about this course. And so we tried so many different things to try to get the students really thinking about the material. So, and we found it to be a challenge. So I missed some of the challenges that people said that they faced. But can somebody be generous and give me 1 or 2? What was said before I walked in?
Getting discussion going.
Getting discussion going, absolutely. And in part that's because students sometimes are, I found, were kind of hesitant to talk about things. And sometimes we were talking about things that were kind of sensitive. I mean, we really were digging into some biases about language and culture that sometimes students were very hesitant. Another part that I found was that students had a hard time engaging in conversation because they had nothing really to add. They weren't coming prepared. They hadn't done the readings. And so while they might be able to talk about their own personal experiences, they really couldn't get deep into the content because they didn't have any. And so they were looking to me to fill it in. And so I did that for a while because we had so many other things going on. But finally, when we got everything situated for the course, then it gave an opportunity to really sit back and think about what is it that we need in this class to get students where they need to be. One of the things also, I don't know if this was mentioned, and I apologize if this is a repeat, but I think it's really important, that this is a required class. And so students are not opting in. Which, for some students, even when they opt in, it's hard to get them to do the readings. But this is one where students were required, and a lot of students were coming into the course thinking, this is not a population of students that I'm going to be working with. Or this is a population of students that the ESL teacher will deal with, and once they are able to speak enough English, then they come to my classroom and everything's going to be fine. And so we had to do a lot of work around ideologies and understanding the requirements of what they were going to be doing and who they were going to be teaching. And so that was challenging, but it was also hard to get them kind of up to speed to thinking about what they can do.
Can we back up a minute?
Yeah,
Are
sure.
you talking, the course that you're talking about, are you talking about it like how you work through these problems by making it a hybrid
Yes.
course?
Exactly.
Okay,
That's
I
exactly
wasn't-
that's the path I was taking on,
Okay.
and how I ended up getting on, and how I got on those trapeze and I made the leap.
Okay.
Because I was thank you, and so we kept trying to think about how do we get the students engaged? How do we get them to read the material? How do we get them thinking about this? How do we get them and we tried all kinds of things. We tried bribing them. Like if you bring, you get a piece of candy, I don't know. Or we tried threatening them. I'm going to do an entrance card, and if you didn't do it, then it's going to count against your participation point. We tried shaming them. Like, okay, now you're going to get together and talk with each other, and you're going to realize that you haven't read and everyone else has read. Well, the fact was that nobody else had read either. So they were all fine. Like it wasn't working. So trying all these different things. So, getting to what you were saying is, it finally got to the point where I thought, we've got to do something different. So the parable of the trapeze, I think, is a lovely. I heard this a couple years ago. And is anyone familiar with it? Okay. So the person who wrote this, look it up, and I apologize for not having the name of the author of this. They do a much better job than I will do right now in explaining it. But basically, the concept is that you get on the trapeze and you can swing and you can swing and swing, right? And you can be happy and that'd be fine. But if you want to get to that other trapeze, the one that's swinging at you, you have to do what? You have to let go. And so that's the hard part. And so all the things that I was trying to do in the course to try to get students to do what I wanted to do, I was not letting go. I was grabbing with one hand and still holding on to the other one. So I kind of kept getting stuck and was not getting results. So finally I had to let go. I had to finally say, okay, I had to do something really, really different. And so that really, really different was the transition to the hybrid class. So now Tal will talk a little bit about the literature that supports this move, because it wasn't, it was, letting go was challenging for many reasons, but being able to read the literature and see what others had found was really helpful in supporting this.
So in the literature, we found that colleges and universities are increasingly offering more online courses and online learning options. Our model that we'll talk about in more detail after the literature, it draws from a hybrid and a flipped classroom approach, which I think you mentioned the flipped classroom, which basically the idea is students are presented with the content, they're assessed on the content in different online formats, and then they come to class to have more interactive and engaging conversations and activities together. So Babb, Stewart, and Johnston found that blended hybrid model is one of the fastest growing formats among colleges and universities. And hybrid models basically employ online lectures and learning tasks, which complement in-person activities. So the idea is using online tools to then complement the in-person activities that students are doing in their face-to-face time. And then students from the flipped classroom were more likely than students from the traditional classroom to agree that active student engagement was consistently encouraged by the instructor, and that preparation was necessary to be successful in the face-to-face. And that's from a study by McLaughlin. So that's just some of the literature.
So here's what we did. There are 4 of us that got together, and we worked on transforming these face-to-face classes. So the courses, I should also say, did you already talk about a little bit? So there's one section is for K-12, early childhood educators, and the other is for middle and secondary. And with that middle and secondary, we had music education, art education, BCIT, just everyone who was doing certification was in that class. And we also had a graduate version of this course. So we decided to start to create the sequence that would blend the split model, but also use the hybrid in an impactful way, because we really wanted students to use their time outside of the classroom to deeply engage with the content. So we set up a structure that it's a loop. So basically, I'll start here. So they would get new content. In the new content, they would read an article, they'd watch a video, they would do something, and then they would have an online quiz. The quiz, we set it up so that there was multiple choice and open-ended questions. Multiple choice were never just like, what if, we're never straight reading comprehension. They were really thinking questions like, which of these is an example of what the author is talking about, and so they would have to actually do some thinking around the content. They couldn't just read it and just skim it and find the answers. We did this, and we set it up so that students could take it again. We gave them ample time to turn it in. We said, if you turn it by this date, we'll grade it. You could take it again by the final date. We wanted students to see that we were invested in them being invested in themselves. And so we gave that opportunity so that they wouldn't be penalized, but it is a grade in their class. This is not a participation grade, it's an actual grade that is in the class. And so we also dropped the 2 lowest grades at the end. So we built in a lot of opportunities for students to have a bad week or 2, but we really wanted to encourage them to make sure that they were doing what they need to do. They get to class, we engage, we do activities, we have them working on lesson plans, we have them doing all kinds of discussions, and we'll talk about what we saw as a result of that. And then the following week, there's a practice and apply where they have to take what they have gotten in these 2 and do something with it. So demonstrate that they understand and they're able to apply these concepts. So in classes that were teacher methodology, it was really about them applying it to lesson planning. For other classes, it was maybe a text analysis or looking at a cartoon and analyzing it for cultural bias and things like that. That was a graded assignment. The same day, these 2 were always due on the same day. So they had, as Erica would always say, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I was like that when we do the hokey pokey.
Okay, so this is where we will jump in and show you how our Canvas course sites are set up. That's the LMS system that we use. So we'll start with Tal's course.
Well, can I just ask, are there any questions at this point? Was that ample wait time?
So
Okay.
are they meeting in class too? Are you seeing them is it a once a week or 3 times a week, or what is?
Yeah, do you want to talk about this?
Sure,
structure?
so
Yeah.
I'll talk about it as I go through my
Okay,
Canvas. So just a reminder, I teach a course called Teaching English Language Learners in the Early Grades. It's for pre-service teachers who are looking to teach K to 3 certification. So one theme of my class is how to make printed materials more understandable for English language learners. And the way it's set up is my course would be a Monday, Wednesday schedule. So Monday we would not meet in class. During that time, there would be content presented in the form of readings and videos. I would do podcasts. I would try to do a mix of different types of materials that students can engage in. And then right after that, there's a new content check-in that students are completing. It's a mix of multiple choice and then short answer. Generally, I wanted to gauge what students were learning that was new to them, or how they would apply it in their own classrooms. So it's just an idea of like what I need to do when we meet face-to-face where students are. So I'm meeting students where they are.
We also would add at the bottom a no-point question that would just say, is there anything that you would like to have reviewed in class, or that you have any questions about, so that there was also that opportunity for them to provide input to the next class.
So the new content for this particular week is about how to make printed materials and adapt them so English language learners can engage in the same text as their English-speaking peers. So in class, we would meet and I would present students with a text that was all text, basically, and they would go into like a Google Doc together and they would work on adapting the text using all of the new content that they received that week. So they would all get the same text, it's only writing, and they would work in a Google Doc together and adapt that text, incorporating visuals, making the text larger, creating bullet points. And then students would all submit those and present them to the class so they can see all the different ways you can adapt one text for the English language learners in the classroom. And then the practice and apply, I started incorporating videos as well for students after class to go back. So if there was something they missed or they needed a refresher on, these are short 10-minute videos that students can go watch at their own time as well. And
Share
then
a little bit about your classroom. So everybody has a computer, everybody has a laptop? One person has a laptop?
Not everyone, but students could use any device, so they can use their phones, they can work with other students. They didn't always, bless you, they weren't always required to do something on a Google Doc. This is just this week. So there would be weeks where they were completing activities that they would then do with their students. And something I should mention is this has a fieldwork component to it. So while students are taking this course, they're also in classrooms with students. And that is where the practice and apply comes in. So after class, I would ask students to obtain a reading or a worksheet from their host teacher who is hosting them in the classroom, and then they would adapt that text on their own and submit it on their own. So they've had time to work on it together with other students, and then they were submitting their own as their assessment. So I can see that they're able to adapt text on their own. And that's the cycle that Dr. Sniad just went through.
How
Yep.
big a class? Is it a classroom like this, or?
Yep, so last semester, my hybrid section had 30 students. So that's the cap. So I'll have as low as 15 students up to 30.
And with movable chairs like this, or? tables,
So
or-
the tables are long. I always move them, so they were always in groups. So students knew that the tables were going to be moved, and then we put them back into rows after class.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Can you go back to the discussion? Can we go, I want to see,
Yep.
of this, just previous.
Yep. So
I just want to see this, how you, so this.
this is in class. This was in class, yeah. But this is an example for you to
And
see.
so you gave them your part of discussion group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You
Mhm.
assigned your students that, and then they uploaded that in the discussion and attached their document, or they just loaded it up.
Yeah,
on
they
the
would send it to
screen.
me, or they would come up to the front of the classroom and open up their own Google Doc and just
Oh,
presents
okay.
it.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, so when you're saying discussion here, I'm thinking you're using the discussion feature.
No, this is in
Okay,
class, yeah, but
okay.
it's just for you to see how
Okay.
it would be outlined in
All right,
class. Yep,
all
so
right,
they would
I
all
see.
receive the same document and then following
Okay,
these.
all right.
Yeah, yeah, so I think that's a really great point. So all of this work is done in person and in small groups, but the discussion board is used, a lot of times we would also use that as a practice and apply. So students would do a journal based on their field work, so
Right,
that it's
okay.
really integrating what they're doing outside.
Okay,
with-
that's
yeah.
fine, I was just,
Yeah.
we were just
Yeah.
cross terms
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
Do you want to go?
Sure. Okay. So I do teach a Foundations for English Language Learners, course as well, as Dr. Lessa does, but mine was for grades 4 through 12. I only had 9 students because it was an 8 a.m. class, so I had a little bit more of a, it was a trade-off, 8 a.m., so they weren't totally awake, but we did have some really amazing and rich discussions because we were able to fortunately work in 3 groups of 3. Sometimes I would place them by content area, sometimes by placement, etc. But my Canvas course site for this class is very similar to Dr. Lessa's, but as I had mentioned before, I do teach a different class for human development and community engagement majors, which, as I mentioned before, the non-traditional future teachers that plan to teach abroad, adults, etc. So this is what my Canvas course looks like for this class. So I have some course information and assignment details at the top, and then very similarly, starting at week 3, students have a practice and apply that they do first, based off of week 2. Then they start their new content. They have the PowerPoint ahead of time for them to look at, any new key terms, and then they have their new content check-in. If you keep scrolling down, it's the exact same model all the way up to week 14. So if they're grouped by whatever topic we'll be discussing for that day, and they're available 2 weeks ahead of time for students. As Dr. Sniad said before, the new content check-ins they can take twice. The practice and apply they can only take once. If they have any questions, I do hold office hours on the off day for them to come see me. And that off day for me was Tuesdays, and the assignments weren't due till Tuesday at midnight. So they had ample opportunity to email me, let me know if there was an issue. So these were done once and also graded at a higher point value. So these are 10 points, whereas the new content check-ins are also 10 points, but the way that they're weighted, the practice that applies for my class were worth 35% of their grade, whereas the new content check-ins were only worth 20% of their grade. And as everyone, just to recapitulate, it's multiple choice and open-ended discussions as well.
And there's also a field component
Yes.
for this course as well.
So for this course as well, there is not a teacher education piece, but is a cultural exchange program. So many of the practice and applies are actually journals. So my students are partnered one-to-one. My students are by and large domestic students. I have had 1 or 2 international students in my class, but they're partnered with an international student at Temple University's IELP, Intensive English Language Program. And so during the duration of the semester, they meet with their partner at least 8 times. They have 2 culture events, one chosen by the American student and one chosen by the international student. And so the off day not only helps them to kind of go through the material, synthesize the material, and have richer discussions during class time, but equally so as the field placement, it provides another hour-and-a-half slot in their very busy schedules, because a lot of Temple students, they work. And they need that time to do whatever field placement correspondence that they might need to do. So as Dr. Sniad was mentioning, many of my practice and applies were CEP journals, so cultural exchange program journals, integrating whatever course concepts we had discussed so far into their discussions with their international partner. Okay. So do we want to talk through it?
Yeah, I mean, so, basically what we found is actually really well aligned with what the literature suggested we might find. Students were really more engaged. We could have conversations at a deeper level. I did the similar one with actually a graduate class of TESOL master students. And for the first time, I mean, we really dug in to zone of proximal development. And they came to class and I put up pictures of different pictures that people have created for zone of proximal development. And I said, so based on the readings, which one of these is accurate? And so we had really deep conversations, and to me it was really exciting to teach. It was fun for me, and it was really good for the students. Do you want to?
Yeah, so we co-authored, or in the process of co-authoring a chapter. And so a lot of this is really self-reflective. So we have one more co-partner in this process. Her name is Anne Rivera.
Yeah.
She's not here today, but so we all sort of interviewed each other about the experience right after the semester was finished. So the first pilot semester was fall 2018. So we sat down and we said, did this work? And we asked ourselves some key questions. And so one of the things that that was my first semester of teaching as an adjunct at Temple, was that, you know, I had really grandiose ideas for how many readings I could assign and all the things I would get through. And Dr. Sniad said, well, you know, just kind of maybe don't have such high expectations, but, you know, be a little bit more realistic with what you can get through on a course period. And so I was delighted. I can't imagine not teaching this way, because I felt my students were by and large prepared every single class. They did almost all of the online discussions, and it was really helpful for me to have those new content check-ins due Tuesdays at midnight, because then every Wednesday that would really help me shape instruction for Thursday. And I felt like I was better prepared to teach because I could see what students got and what they didn't get, and then it would be very informative for me as their instructor to see where I should guide the discussion.
Yeah, and for me, the first time I taught my course, it was a face-to-face, and I had a similar challenge of I didn't get to discussions I wanted to, or other interactive activities, because I was spending a bulk of my time going over content that I already expected my students to know, and because they didn't, I had to go over it in order to dig deeper. So when I taught this for the first time as a hybrid, and I should mention that when Dr. Sniad approached me, I was really against it, more so because I was fearful, like I just never had taught in an online setting at all. But once I started to teach it, I really noticed students were a lot more engaged. They even would say this is breaking up lectures and PowerPoints, like the traditional lecture that they're used to in a classroom, by being able to come in and have discussions that are very high level thinking and being very interactive with their peers. So yeah, I had a very positive experience with it. I'm still, and I think we all are still evolving with it with each semester as we collect feedback from students as well. But.
So increased accountability, the students themselves, and additionally holding each other accountable. We really found that you know, students, it was really easy for me to get to know students very quickly. I would say by week 2 or 3, I could hear their voices in the online format. Whereas we had talked a little bit about the challenges of face-to-face, and you had mentioned, like, you know, making sure it's equal participation in discussion and not one student's talking all the time, that we're not talking all the time. So this allowed for different personalities to really shine, because some people shine in face-to-face and then some people shined more in the online format.
Absolutely. And one of the things also about in terms of accountability is, you know, we also had to train students on how to do this at the beginning. And they trained us on how to do this in the beginning. So we would ask questions like, what is this, you know, what does this mean, or something? Or according to the text, what does this mean? And then students would cut and paste it from the text and put it in and be like, there you go. So we then learned that we had to ask the question of, you know, in your own words. What does this mean? And then they were like, oh, and so I said to them, I said, you know, I see this evolving. You're really, you know, putting this in your words. So they're like, well, you asked us to. And I said, okay. So it was good to know. So we learned that we had to ask things in particular ways, and they also learned that, you know, so we had explained, like, we're not looking for you to cut and paste. We're looking for you to do some deep thinking, and you're going to lose points for not doing that kind of work, because that's the expectation. I also found that I said at the beginning, one of the earliest classes, I said, oh, and I'm so excited, you're going to listen to a podcast and they're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. And then I asked in the
It's like week 2.
And then it was week 2. And then I asked in the open-ended question, so, you know, in your own words, what was this about? And they repeated the description that I gave to the class. So I said, okay, so now in terms of accountability, I would write back and says, it seems to me that you may not have had time to watch the video or to listen to this podcast. If I'm misunderstanding this, please come see me, and so we can talk about it. It didn't happen again. So there were things that, again, we kind of had to learn with the students to implement this. But once they got it and they got the rhythm, it was good. We also got a lot of pushback at the beginning. Students said, this is outside of my learning style. Not my learning style. I do much better when I hear the lecture first. So could you give the lecture and then we'll do the check-ins? And I said, so you want me to tell you what's in the text and then you can do the checks? And they're like, maybe. So, and they didn't want to. So we really through this forced them to do it, and in the end, it ended up being a benefit. But you know, it's not easy when students are expressing a lot of stress at the beginning. So, we fortunately we worked together, and we had our own support system to be able to manage that.
Perfect transition in. So transitioning from face-to-face to hybrid is not smooth for instructors nor easy for students. So, you know, some of our recommendations would be, it's summer. It's a lot easier to think through this transition when you have an extended period of time to do so. If you have co-collaborators or instructors in your department that teach similar classes, maybe perhaps just different grade levels, even if it's not within College of Education. So if you have a team, I think it's easy to think through, because as we were all experiencing the same issues at around the same time, the peaks of this semester.
Something I wanted to mention is with Canvas. I don't know what the learning systems you all use, but we use Canvas at Temple, is not assuming that students know how to navigate it. And that was an assumption that I had made the first time I taught it. So that really was a challenge for some students. So something that I did differently the next semester is make sure I had a video where I helped students navigate Canvas beforehand. So that way they knew where to find everything before the course started, and that was a learning curve, definitely.
Yeah.
Did you have to make that, or was that available from your IT department or something like that?
I made that, and then I just shared it, and it's something that we can use every semester now.
Yeah.
It didn't take really long. I used like a Screen-O-Matic type format, and I just literally showed students on the student view, like, here's where you go if you need this, here's where you go to sign up for office hours and all that. So if students ever couldn't find anything, instead of me telling them, I would tell them to go reference the video. Yeah. So.
Yeah. One other learning curve that we had is when your plan is to give students an opportunity to take the quiz again, don't let the answers pop up right after they submit the responses. Yeah, that was also something that we had to learn to go back and go through a checklist of making sure the settings were just right for that.
And I wanted to add one more thing about something that's really important for me is student relationships, which is why I was a little wary of going to this format, because I think face-to-face time is really important, especially with pre-service teachers who haven't been in the classroom yet. But I found that my relationships were strengthened because I was using the face-to-face time to work with individual groups and check in with students rather than standing at the front and going over material. So that was something that surprised me. I didn't expect, but I was pleasantly surprised that I was able to develop really strong relationships in that way.
Yeah, so, you know, the initial commitment can be high, getting everything online, thinking through the, you know, sort of pre-quizzes, post-quizzes, et cetera, but we now found that our Canvas course sites are set up. We taught the same classes fall 2018 as spring 2019. It was a much less arduous experience. I think so we also surveyed students in all 4 of the classes in fall 2018. So we have some positive feedback as well as some critical feedback. The students who really enjoyed it, I mean, most students really enjoyed it. They enjoyed the accountability. As Dr. Lessa was saying, they felt like the class time was more meaningful in developing a relationship with her, with the instructor, with each other, talking through what field placement experiences were like, et cetera. And then, as Dr. Sniad had mentioned before, is that, you know, students wanted the new content check-ins after. It was challenging for some to keep up, right? That sort of self-regulatory that we were talking about, keeping themselves organized.
Yeah. I mean, and that was one of the things. I mean, we also want to be real about that we did have a couple students who had to leave the class because they fell too far behind. And so sometimes in a traditional class, there's ways to catch up. And in this kind of format, it was very, very difficult for the students to be able to catch up when they fell too far behind. 1 or 2 weeks, you know, because we have those safety nets kind of built in for them, that's fine, but when it gets beyond that, it became really hard for them.
Yeah, one more thing I want to mention is the idea of more work than traditional face-to-face classes. So students understanding that the work they're doing outside of class doesn't equal seat time, that it's still a lot of work, and that's something that we had to be really open with our students about, because then they had this feeling that they were doing more work in a hybrid course than a face-to-face, even though they were just being more accountable now and reading and doing the work.
Right.
Yeah, rather than being like, I'm just gonna show up and my instructor will give me all the work, so maybe that's where the disconnect could be.
Yeah.
Okay, so we collected some survey data in terms of, when students felt comfortable. Most felt comfortable right away or after a few weeks. There was about a quarter who did not feel comfortable with this at all. Again, this was the pilot, so I think that we have some preliminary data that we toyed around with sharing for today, but it's just not a full picture yet. But the spring 2019 already seems even more positive, so we'll share that with you when we have a full, complete set. And then given the opportunity, I would register for another class again. This is the piece here where students agree or strongly agree, and then it's sort of, about 40% are not sure or disagree. But all in all, very, very positive feedback.